Hello, everyone. ESBR Boxing. We are back. Three of us here. Three of us means only one thing. We're going to take a little bit of a deep dive look at an upcoming fight that's taking place in April, 22nd of April at Cardiff International Arena. We've got a world title action, IBF World Super Featherweight title fight between Joe Cordina and well, I'm not going to say the first name. I'm just going to say that Mr. Rakhimov. So those two guys are fighting on that date. For those of you that are casuals, I include myself in that. This is a real treat. I myself am a casual sitting between two hardcores of the boxing fraternity. We've got Gregory and Danny, my two esteemed colleagues. We're going to come to you lads in a minute and ask how you're doing. But first, we're going to obviously, to say that those of you that are viewing, we're going through this. We've got some different talking points. We'll try and keep it swift as we always do. But we'll start off, I suppose, with a look at the CVs. But firstly, guys, Danny, Greg, how are you guys doing? How are you guys feeling about this fight? You looking forward to it?
Good, mate. Great fight. One of the standout cards, I think, of this DAZN schedule. So now looking forward to chatting the fight with you.
Yeah, joining Danny with that. Really good fight. Great clash of styles. Looking forward to a good fight.
Absolutely. I'm just going to give you guys, obviously, the guys that are watching, a quick sort of tale of the tape. Very, 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 very quick. Rakhimov, 28 years old, with a record of 17-0-1. Won the title last time out, stopping Zelfa Barrett. It's obviously, a name familiar to British names, to British fans there. The ninth round. Other names on that record, I suppose, would be sort of Joseph Diaz, who got a majority decision draw with. Going over to Cordina. Cordina, obviously, with a stellar amateur record. Medalist there, was 31 years old, 15-0 record with 9 KOs. Was obviously the previous IBF World Super Featherweight champion. Won the belt against Benicio Gawa with I think what would be described as a surprising and scintillating second round KO stoppage. Was then stripped, I suppose, unfairly or contentiously, whichever way you want to look at it. Rakhimov obviously beat Barrett for the title. Now these two guys meet again. Coming to you, Greg, first. Both these guys, like I've said, one Cordina 15-0, Rakhimov 17-0-1. Similar number of fights on their record. Whose record do you think at this stage of their careers is looking the better of the two?
Yeah, thanks, Elliott. For me at the moment, I think you would have to say Rakhimov. He's a little bit more tested than Cordina. Cordina's had a few good wins. What interests me about Cordina is he's looked a bit bored in most of his fights and fairly one-paced. And I think Ogawa brought the best out of him, but it still didn't answer a lot of questions because that was like a Hail Mary knockout and it was very, very early in the fight. So we didn't get to see what, if a world-class fighter puts on Cordina, what he's truly made of, but that's not his fault. I think we would all take a second round knockout if it was on offer to win a world title. So yeah, for me, Rakhimov has just fought the slightly better opposition, guys like Jojo Diaz in there. So it's a tight one, but at the moment, I think you've got to sway with Rakhimov having the better resume.
No, very good, Danny. I'm going to pass over to you. Obviously, the same sort of question, really. Greg's obviously given us a bit of a summary there of his thoughts on the CV. Do you agree with Greg? Do you think that the Rakhimov does have the slightly better record at this stage?
Yeah, it's funny. I was just sort of thinking, like, before we started the video, like, what I was going to talk about, and Greg's actually said a couple of things I was thinking bang on. I would say I think the Ogawa win as an isolated win is probably the best win on either CV, but I would agree with Greg. Rakhimov definitely has the deeper CV. Greg mentioned the Jojo Diaz. I know it was a draw, but he won that fight really. And then Azinga Vazile, very good fighter, and obviously Zelfa Barrett. Whereas aside from Ogawa, you look at Cordina's and you're getting into like what that Kurbanov fella for the European was it, and what Gavin Gwynn, I think. Like no disrespect to Gavin Gwynn, but a British level fighter. So I think Rakhimov's definitely got the deeper resume, as Greg said, more tested. And just on that, the Ogawa win, like I think that was Cordina's like absolute best punch. I can't see that happening in this fight. I know we'll probably come on to that later. So I think there are still a lot of question marks, like as Greg said again, going down the stretch with a world-class fighter about Cordina, but it makes it all the more interesting.
No, absolutely. So if we take these guys are ranked. Well, obviously this is the IBF title, but these guys are ranked sort of 4 and 5 currently in the ring magazine ranking. So you've obviously got above them is Valdez, Hector Garcia and Foster as well. Do you see these guys being sort of that high up in the division? Like we said, obviously, I suppose Cordina's only had sort of 15 fights. He's had obviously the Gower victory. The division isn't necessarily as stacked as obviously the division's potentially above that. But do you think this is kind of where these guys sit? Do you think they are kind of top five in the division, both of them? And I'm going to start with you, Danny, there.
I think so, definitely. The Ogawa win for Cordina anyway was, a legitimate top 5 win. And whilst Rakhimov doesn't have like the standout win, I think the 2 or 3 really, really solid wins would definitely have him up there. I mean, especially since like you factor in Shakur Stevenson's up at lightweight now, so there's your best 130 pounders gone. I think Navarrete is probably going to come back down by all accounts to fight Valdez. So you can make a case that those two are maybe 1 and 2, or certainly they're definitely in the top 5 as well. But you would definitely have to have these two definitely in your top 5, if not very close to it. Certainly Cordina for that Ogawa win, for my money anyway.
Greg, over to you. Do you agree with Danny there?
Couldn't have said it much better, if I'm being honest with you, Elliott. I think both guys really need to be up there. Both guys have been world champion. They've got good wins on their record. And yeah, I think if you win a world title and you're undefeated, you've got to be up there as long as you've got the names on your resume. And like Danny said there, Ogawa was right up there as being one of the best in the division. And Rakhimov is quite consistent with 3 really good names on his record, like Danny said. Jojo Diaz, he probably won that fight. Zelfa Barrett, so yeah, I think to keep it short and sweet, I think both guys really should be up there top 5, yeah.
Just talking a bit about rankings and ratings as well. I mean, obviously there's different rankings and rating systems that people use. Obviously, you can look at it like world champions. You can look at it as guys that maybe don't have belts that are still ranked very high. I was thinking, without wanting to give a sort of prediction away at this stage, taking obviously the champions that we've got, United Kingdom, I suppose Sonny Edwards, Fury, Okoli. But you'd also count maybe Josh Taylor around there as well. I'll put him in that conversation. But other guys that were kind of your sort of Warringtons, your AJs, Lee Woods, all those sort of guys. Where if Cordina wins on Saturday night, the 22nd of April, where would you put him on a sort of British pound for pound ranking list? Quite a contentious question, and it's also subjective. But Greg, I'm going to come to you there first. Where do you reckon he'd sit behind some of those names we've mentioned, or additional names that come to your mind?
A really, really good question, Elliott, because there's a lot of, I wouldn't say this is one of our most rewarding time as British fight fans in terms of talent at the moment, but you need to give guys like Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Josh Taylor, Lawrence Okoli, whether he's good to watch or not, that's another thing, but you need to give all these guys credit, and it's a tough question. I would definitely have Joe Cordina maybe top 8 at this present moment in time. I'll be honest, I'm trying to fly through my mind, like you say, Lee Wood, Josh Warrington, etc. For me, he's got to be in the top 8 to 6 for sure. But I think we'll find out a lot more after this fight, just as to where we rank him, because this is a hard fight for him.
Danny, as well, I'll come to you on that. Some other names that are sort of kicking around on one of the ranking systems I've looked at. Callum Smith, obviously, some of the guys at the Outlook, big fans of Callum Smith. Ryder, Dogbo, still kicking around there as well. For you, if Cordina does win, where would you place him roughly? Would you agree with Greg that you're sort of looking like top 8, top 6? Or are you looking even higher than that?
Well, I think Greg was saying he's top 8 or top 6 now, which I would probably agree with. But I think if he wins this, and it's probably because, as you were saying, we're not really in like a boom as such in terms of British fighters having a great deal of success, you'd have to put him up there, because it depends what you go off. If you go for pound in terms of ability, or pound for pound in terms of like what they've actually done and who they've actually beat, because Sonny Edwards is like often cited as one of the pound for pound best British fighters, and I would agree on talent, but he's beat an aging Michelini and then that Alvarado who was coming up from light flyweight. Whereas if Cordina beats Rakhimov at the weekend, he's beaten 2 world champions, he's beaten 2 bona fide 130 pound fighters who, we said would be consensus top 5 in the world at the time. So I think for me, I think if you're going off resume, Josh Taylor still has to be your number 1, like undisputed in 16, 17 fights. Like it feels as if that gets forgotten a lot. And then you look at your Furies, and then I think after that, you can definitely make an argument for Cordina being certainly entering the top 5, and I would probably have him, a shade or 2 higher than that.
Yeah, no, I think Cordina's one of those guys as well, isn't he? There's always been kind of mentioned, had a bit of a stop-start career, has been on those sort of matchroom shows where he stopped guys in the first round, these I think kind of mismatches and been injured, and etc. So I suppose, yeah, from that perspective, it'd be nice to see him get in, and obviously if he gets this victory as well, the recognition that would come following that, and obviously the bigger fights that would come following that, and then maybe shift through the weight a bit as well, and see how he can fulfill that potential. I'm going to come to you guys now. We're going to do a little bit on I suppose the fight itself. Obviously, as I said earlier, we're looking at it. You've got, I think it's probably fair to say that Cordina with that Agawa KO was almost an aberration. Really, we're looking at before that going. This is a guy that tends to go the distance a fair amount. Doesn't necessarily maybe have the power of someone in comparison to someone like Rakhimov, who has obviously 14 KOs and 17 fights. I'm going to come to you, Greg, first. I'm going to ask, what sort of style of fight are you expecting here? You can either take, either fighter, or you can kind of take the fight as a whole. How are you expecting this sort of fight to play out without giving a prediction necessarily? What sort of style of contest are you expecting?
I think Rakhimov's going to put it on him, and I think he has to. He has to really go after him, not give him a minute to breathe. The interesting part, Elliott, where we'll find out what kind of fight this is going to be, is if Cordina can hurt Rakhimov. And if he can, he needs to at least make Rakhimov think, oh, I can't do that again early. If it goes into round 5, 6 and he's not hurt him, Rakhimov will just see he's going to steamroll all night. He didn't give up with Zelfa Barrett, and Zelfa Barrett's got good boxing ability as well. So I think it's really going to be a bit of a bull and matador effect fight, but I think it's going to be absolutely pivotal that Cordina gets his respect in terms of power. Now, that might sound ridiculous because we've just seen him possibly get one of the best knockouts from a British fighter of all time, but lightning doesn't always strike twice in the same place. So, yeah, I'm expecting a very tough and high-paced fight, and it'll be a matter of who can basically adjust and show their strengths. And whoever can do that, I see them going on and winning the fight.
Danny, Greg said they're expecting a sort of tough, high-paced, fast-paced fight, and looking for sort of that bullet matador kind of style. Is that something you see happening as well? Is that the sort of the fight plan, the fight layout that you see going ahead on the 22nd?
Mate, bang on. When you asked the question and Greg was doing his answer, I was thinking in my head, bull and matador, and then he said it. And he's spot on as well, and I think it'll be a really, really tough fight for Cordina. I'd imagine he's going to go into it, the bookmaker's favourite, and rightfully so, based off what we saw against the Agawa. But Rakhimov's so different stylistically in Agawa. I mean, both big punchers, both a good knockout percentage, but Agawa, for one, was orthodox and was standing upright to be caught with a right hand, whereas Rakhimov's a southpaw and makes himself a lot smaller. So I'm not sure Cordina will be able to land that shot again. Whether that translates as not being able to hurt him at all, we'll see. He's obviously a very well-skilled amateur. He's got more than just a big right hand, but no, I think it'll be a tough fight, and I think you could definitely see Cordina up after 5, 6. I mean, Zelfa Barrett was boxing out of his skin, but Rakhimov was making him throw so much, and then the gas tank just emptied really, really quickly, and obviously we all saw what happened after that. So it depends. Cordina, as Greg says, either has to hit him with something to dissuade him from coming forward, or he needs to be able to have an unbelievable gas tank, which I'm not sure he does. I don't think he's got a bad gas tank, but you would need to have insane levels of cardio and really, really good feet as well, which Cordina, for as good a pure boxer as he is, he never goes really, really on the back foot. So no, I think it'll be a tough fight for him. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'm gonna actually pin you lads both down now on the ropes. You both alluded to the fact there that the Cordina, obviously with the Agawa knockout, has power. Obviously Danny mentioned there, and Greg, you also mentioned that it doesn't necessarily guarantee that shot's going to land again, and obviously with the southpaw versus the orthodox style as well. Danny, I'll come back to you and just ask: Do you think realistically? I mean, like we said, we've never seen Rakhimov stopped or down. Do you think Cordina has the power essentially to earn his respect necessarily, and potentially stop Agawa? Is that something you can expect? You could not expect necessarily, but you can see happening, or is that very unlikely in your mind?
I would be very surprised if Cordina stopped him, based off sort of the reasons he gave for the previous question. Just his chin's not going to be as presented as Agawa's was, and Zelfa Barrett sort of hurt him a bit. I think it was like an uppercut they caught him with, and I think if there is a shot to hurt him, that would be the one. It might seem strange to say, but I still think Zelfa Barrett's a bigger, certainly a crisper puncher than Cordina. And again, he sort of dazed Rakhimov briefly, but never really was on the brink of stopping him. So he's definitely got the power. I mean, we saw he fucking put Agawa out absolutely ice cold, so it'd be stupid to say he doesn't have the power to hurt him. He obviously does, and he's definitely got power to keep him honest. But I would be surprised if we saw a Cordina stoppage here. I do have to be honest.
Greg, similar surprise for you? I mean, potential, as only saying potential for that shot to land, but very surprised if Cordina managed to get a stoppage or hurt it in that significant way that we saw him stop Agawa.
Yeah, what Danny said there, it spoke a lot of sense because Rakhimov is a southpaw and he is shorter in height than Agawa, so this is a completely different fight. If you were going to ask me the punch that would hurt him, I think it is the uppercut. But don't be surprised if Cordina targets the body in this fight because Rakhimov looks like one of these guys that if he's coming forward with all that momentum, then sometimes that can double the power if you're caught. And I just think with the GB background and everything that Cordina has, and the way that he throws, he's very, very skilled. The way that he throws his punches. Don't be surprised if Cordina targets the body and does hurt him. Whether it keeps him down and takes him out, that's a different. I'm going to be honest there. I really need to sit in the fight. I think this is such a hard fight to really say what you think is going to happen because for me, it looks as though Joe Cordina, you get the best out of him when his back's against the ropes in terms of when the opposition has stepped up. But this is a step up against a guy that's a bit of an animal. So it's a very, very tough one. But I would say Cordina is capable of hurting him, yes. But whether he hurts him or not, it's really going to depend on how the fight plays out.
Well, obviously, we focus, I suppose, on the potential for Cordina to hurt Rakhimov in a way that we'd expect Rakhimov to hurt Cordina. If we invert it slightly, I'll come back to you, Greg, and say Danny alluded to there with Self Barrett being a skilled boxer and pure boxer, but at the same time, do you think Rakhimov? Well, we saw what happened when he obviously drained Barrett and stopped him there. Do you think Rakhimov has the actual boxing ability, were it to go 12 rounds, to outpoint Joe Cordina, or if it does go 12 rounds, do you expect Cordina to win?
I think he can outpoint Cordina over 12 rounds because I don't really have any bulletproof reason for this, but something in me doubts Cordina's tank. I don't know why. I mean, I think he could still go quite a few rounds. If he goes, say, 6 rounds and it's 4-2 Cordina, what happens if Rakhimov wins the last 6 rounds because Cordina's absolutely gassed out? I think he can win in points, but there's so many things that can happen in this fight, Elliott. It is so hard to predict because we've seen Joe Cordina throw a Hail Mary punch and win the world title, but we've not seen him in a long, grueling fight with a world-class fighter, and we're going to see that now for the first time, I think.
Danny, over to you as well. I totally agree with you. That was a brilliant answer. So, Danny, I'm going to come to you as well for your listener. Do you think if it goes 12 rounds that Rakhimov, like Greg saying there, can outpoint Cordina? Would you expect Cordina to prevail over 12 rounds?
He can definitely win on points, not through outboxing him, just through like Cordina needs to win a lot of these early rounds because Rakhimov will come on strong. So he definitely is capable of doing enough to get a decision that way. It's tricky because like against Zelfa Barrett, Zelfa Barrett, as I say, boxed out of his skin, but Rakhimov looked a bit average like those first 3-4 rounds, but just was relentless. And as Greg said, we've not seen Cordina's gas tank, tested in those later stages of a fight. You have to factor in it's obviously in Cardiff as well. So, like, if Cordina wins the first 5 rounds and Rakhimov wins the back 7 and there's 1 or 2 close ones, what way is it realistically going to go? Which you always have to consider. But no, he definitely can win on points just through work rate, through consistent pressure. If not, like Cordina's obviously the slicker boxer of the two, but that doesn't mean he can't be beat on points, if you know what I'm saying.
Thank you very much, Danny. Gregory, you've said there that you want to sit on the fence. You're not allowed to sit on the fence, unfortunately. We are going to finish this video with I suppose a sense of an impression or a slight prediction as to which way it's going. Obviously, take into all factors, taking obviously I suppose Cordina's power, taking Rakhimov's power equally, and the potential to go longer than Cordina's engine, taking the fact that it's in Cardiff. I'll let you off, Greg, slightly. I'll go to you, Danny, first for your prediction at this stage. Then we will come to you, Greg. I don't want to see any communication or or connection issues. You will be giving a prediction whether I have to paste it into this video, insert it into the video afterwards. Danny, you first, please. How are you seeing it play out?
I don't know. I'm torn between Rakhimov getting to him late, like sort of after round 9, or Cordina just nicking a decision with the skin of his teeth and surviving some really hairy moments. So I honestly don't know. I'll go Cordina decision just because I'm more likely to bump into him.
Greg, Cordina decision in one camp. Are you going along with that, or where's your you've got money, you've got a bet, which way you go?
Well, I'm just glad that how much you talk Danny up on these videos, and Danny's even saying he finds it so hard to call. I do. I find it so hard. At this present moment in time, I got a feeling I think Cordina's going to stop him. I think he's going to get him at some point. I just think Cordina is so clever the way that he punches, and I think he's capable of targeting the body really well. And I just think he's going to get more respect from Rakhimov than what Zelfa Barrett did. I think Zelfa Barrett's very good in his own right. He's very awkward, but I just think, taking everything into consideration, it's in Wales. Cordina feels as though he's got a point to prove. I just think that Cordina's going to get him at some point, whether he's ahead or he's behind. I think it is. I'm absolutely certain that Cordina is going to hurt him at some point in this fight, but it's just a matter of when. So I'm going to go. I think Cordina's going to get him at some point. I'm going to say Cordina stoppage.
Well, lads, thank you very much for your time. Obviously, if the guys get
What's
right,
your prediction, Mr. Greg?
No, where are you going?
Please, mate, if you don't mind.
I reckon Rakhimov's going to beat. I reckon Rakhimov stoppage. That's where I'm going. But I mean, if you two lads are correct, you two lads are the hardcore say. I think if that comes in, then we're looking at and the new in Cardiff. I'd like to say, obviously, you guys have been watching. Thank you, obviously, for joining us, for tuning in. I think it's hard really to know who often is the bull and who's the matador. But I suppose in this case, I've been the matador. Lucky not to be gored by these two bulls, these two hardcore bulls that we've got here on the line. But guys, thanks for watching. Check out obviously the rest of the content. Obviously, this is a massive fight, but we'll have other further content obviously coming up. We've obviously got betting show where you look at the odds on this event. We'll have written previews, undercard previews, interviews with fighters on the cards, etc. Looking forward to a great night. Obviously, we deserve, I suppose, better than what we're getting sometimes in Britain for good nights. This is a good night. Tune in and watch it. All that's left to say is Danny and Greg, thank you very much for joining me. Any last words for those that are watching?
Thanks very much. Appreciate you sticking it out with us this long.
Yeah, thanks again, Elliott. Thanks for having us.